Dear colleagues, checking the connection, checking whether we are ready to start our workshop, our session.
Yeah, Marina, I think you're good to go.
Excellent. I see we have participants joining online. I know that we are also recording the session, so whoever is joining us a little bit later will be able to monitor and to revisit the beginning of our discussion. Dear colleagues, dear participants, dear guests of this session, I'm very thrilled to be able to open it and welcome everyone who is joining us to the session, which is devoted to diverse partnerships as a tool for us to reach inclusive data with the focus on migration. So I'm very happy to moderate this interactive session, which will be quite short. That's why I will be trying to talk as little as possible to enable our distinguished guests, the experts who are convening on this session and this panel with me today, to update you on the situation in the world of migration data, in the world of international cooperation. So I'm really happy to present the panel who is going to spend this time with me today. Which will consist of our dear collaborators from four organizations, in addition to the one that I represent. And I'm speaking about the United Nations Department for Economic Social Affairs. I'm happy to have with us, actually in person, at the Data Forum, there in the room, Francesca Groom, a dear colleague. And Francesca, please help me to also ensure that those who might be in the room are also following us and also are engaging. So Francesca is Assistant Director from Demographic and Social Statistics, and she will be one of the speakers today. In addition to Francesca, we also have Diego Iturralde, the Chief Director in the area of demographics and social statistics from Statistics South Africa. Diego is also a very dear friend and collaborator in the area of migration statistics. He will be joining us as well, but virtually today. And the third speaker is Jean-Christophe Dumont. Jean-Christophe represents the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development based in Paris. He is the head of Migration Division. And similarly, as Francesca and Diego, the UNSD and Statistics Africa, Jean-Christophe has been really critical collaborator for us in the area of international migration data and statistics. So before I give the floor to the speakers, I want to say a few words about myself and a little bit about the topic of the session. My name is Marina Manke. I am the chief of the Global Migration Data Analysis Center based in Berlin as one of the two parts of the Global Data Institute IAM has recently set up in Berlin, together with displacement tracking metrics team, global coordination team. And of course, our organization, for us, the work in migration is really the quintessence of everything that we are doing. But as you see, also as a development with the setup of the Institute, that is really an indication of the importance that the global community is attaching to the topic of data and information and evidence, which helps us design better responses and really ensure that those on the ground, people on the move, but also governments who are there responsible for setting up proper and effective mechanisms to ensure that human mobility is happening along safe, orderly, and regular manners, So data becomes a critical element, and that is, again, I represent the part of the organization, the International Organization for Migration, which is working hard on data. But this is really not about IOM, this is not about myself today, so it's really about the topic of how we can work together across different structures, institutions, to ensure that really we have the best knowledge possible about the situation of people on the move, about migrants, be it those who take their own decision to go and improve their situation or join their relatives in another country, or maybe those who are fleeing a situation of conflict or deteriorating climate and environmental conditions. We do not know enough about those people. Yes, we know a general number of international migrant stock. We might come up with numbers, with estimates, but I think we need much more to know whether they are children or women, whether they have sufficient access to all the benefits that they're entitled to, or maybe they are right now not necessarily aware about some perils. They are taking up a decision to cross maybe a sea or Mediterranean route becomes again very, very challenging and very, very dangerous for people. So how do we ensure that we have that knowledge so that those people receive sufficient information and governments have all the right mechanisms in place? So this is the topic which we are focusing on today. There's a lot of work happening within the United Nations, and again among us. So we're speaking about diverse partnership. We speak about the importance of bringing different stakeholders together. And maybe I would kindly ask Francesca to give us an update on all the efforts which have happened in the last few years within our collaboration, within the expert group which we have set up within the United Nations, but also maybe some specific examples elsewhere in the world. So Francesca, I pass the floor to you for your introductory opening statement.
Okay, thank you so much, and greetings from the beautiful Anjo. It's a pity that you, dear colleagues, couldn't make it, but I'm very happy to be with you here. And I have to say it's a little weird because this is supposed to be a fully virtual event, so they gave me the choice: do you want to be in the conference room that is booked for your event, or do you want a little booth and sit by yourself? I say, you know what? I'm going. If it's empty, the room is empty, I'll talk with the technicians otherwise, but actually I acknowledge all of you. Thank you for being with me today. And yes, Marina, the room is quite big too. So from my side, I put together a few slides. Those help me, and I hope they will also help you to follow my intervention. Quite straightforward. We want to talk about the importance of partnerships and collaboration to ensure that the data we produce are the best and the most comprehensive, and they can really inform policymakers and other decision makers. But before I talk about data partnerships, I start at the global level. I know that my colleague online, Diego, will zoom in into the importance of establishing data partnership at the national level. And I know that also Jean-Christophe will complement with the perspective of OECD. But given that I've been invited to share with you the global initiatives to ensure data partnerships, I want to start with setting the stage. And talking about the renewed attention on the importance of migration data. So you are all aware of the SDGs, the framework that we have been monitoring for a few years now. You are probably also familiar with the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration, or GCM. If you are in this room, I assume you are very interested in the topic of international migration. And you also know that we have observed new patterns in migration over the last few, I would say, at least 2 decades. There has been also an increase in migration. So all of these elements have really added and increased the demand for accurate, granular, and timely data on international migration, but also on migrants themselves. Who are they? Marina pointed out that more or less we have a good sense of the volume of international migrants. So we are talking about the stock of migrants, population migrants, and those are traditionally produced from population housing censuses. But once we move to the flow of migration, so really the events, the available information at the global level is so much lower. I think on top of my mind, we probably have the UN Statistics Division information for around 60 countries in addition to countries from the European Union. So we are really looking at very scarce information on migration flows, and that's not acceptable because that's really the basic. So huge increase on the attention of international migration because of global commitment, because migration has been acknowledged as at the center of achieving inclusive and sustainable development. And of course, there is this call for more data on stock and flows, but also on how migrants integrate in the host societies, on the impact of migration on host societies, host communities, but also on countries of origin, and also very important, coming up with data and the knowledge on the drivers behind the reasons why people migrate. So all this information that is critically important for informing policies, for informing research, is not available yet in many countries. So there is a huge information gap. And for those of you who are familiar with the production of migration data at the country level, you probably will recognize some of these challenges. At the national level, there is a lack of harmonization across the concepts and definitions that the many data producers are actually using. There is also a lack of coordination among the many data producers involved on migration issues at the national level. There is lack of capacity in analyzing the data. Some lack of methods and overall lack of resources. So to address these issues, of course, there is the need to working together, creating what we call data partnerships, making sure that everybody is at the table, and it's not just about the statisticians. We are also thinking of relying on data produced by the private sector, making sure that the policymakers as critical users of the data that we produce are also there. Academia to be involved, the donors, as I said, in some cases, in many cases, the scarcity in the data is also due to lack of resources, including financial resources. So data partnership in this context is a must-have and something that we are really striving to put together at the national and global levels. But just for your information, that's the context, the previous slide, these data gaps. The context in which the Statistical Commission decided to establish a group of experts in 2018 to address some of the issues I mentioned before, lack of a conceptual framework, the lack of agreed concepts and definitions, the need for providing capacity building at the country level, and many other aspects. So this group is established, was established in 2018, is composed by more or less 50 experts. We work very nicely together. The colleagues will speak after me are of course part of this expert group. What is important is that the group brings together both national experts as well as international experts, so that we really want to make sure that what at the international level we agreed among ourselves really makes sense and is relevant at the national level. We also work closely with academia. I think there are 4 institutes that are represented in this United Nations group of experts. That's a fantastic way to collaborate and create data partnerships. I also want to mention other channels for improving the way we work together. So I'm talking about the series of international fora on migration statistics that we have been organizing over the years. The first one was in 2018, hosted by OECD. The second one was in Cairo, so hosted by the government of Egypt, and mainly organized under the leadership of IOM. And the third one organized in Santiago del Chile under the leadership of DESA, the office that I represent, with Statistics Division and Population Division. The core of my intervention is this. So I wanted to share with you some of the critical outputs that this group of experts have been working on. We have been mandated to revisit, to update the 1998 United Nations recommendations on statistics on international migration. 1998, so quite old. A lot of things have happened, and there was an absolute need to update this conceptual framework. I would need a few hours to explain all the changes that we have proposed and that have been adopted by the United Nations Statistical Commission in 2021. But just in a nutshell, the new conceptual framework, first of all, makes a clear distinction between international migration and temporary mobility in this broader chapeau overarching framework looking at international mobility. The new conceptual framework also clarify or promotes an alignment between migration flows and the definition of resident population by ensuring the same measurement criteria between these two concepts, resident population and migration flows. And then finally, the new conceptual framework also promotes or ensures, the way we put the building blocks together, coherence between migration flows and migrant stocks. Another critical output of the work of this expert group is a set of recommended indicators. There is way too much information in this slide, but just listen to me. This set of indicators, if you look at the core indicators, is composed of 25 basic indicators. 4 are just looking at stocks and flows of migrants. So that's the basic that every country should be able to produce on a regular basis. And we want to make sure that indeed this is going to happen in the near future. And then we are proposing another 21 indicators that are actually SDG indicators. So these are already produced at the country level. And we just want to make sure that those 21 SDG indicators are disaggregated by migratory status. Maybe here I should also say that these 25 indicators have been packaged to respond to specific policy issues that are highlighted into 6 different themes. So the first one is all about stocks and flows, again, the basic for demographic analysis, etc. The second one is much more challenging in terms of data production, is trying to look at irregular migration. So we didn't agree on any core indicators, but we are proposing additional indicators. So it will not be mandated on countries. It will be if they have the resources, if they have the capacity, please follow this set of proposed 8 indicators. And then the following 4 areas are looking at the level of integration of migrants in the host societies. This was also, by the way, endorsed, so we are very proud because when I present it like this, it seems straightforward, but behind this work, there are years of negotiations and technical work and piloting. So we were very proud that the United Nations Statistical Commission, that's the highest level of the global statistical community. It's an intergovernmental body reporting to ECOSOC and the General Assembly. So member states agreed to use this framework, 25 core indicators that countries should be able to produce in the near future. I'm almost done. I just want to share with you that the group, this expert group, has also been working on other elements. First of all, now that we have agreed on the conceptual framework, what we want to measure and why, we also want to come up with some guidelines, more hands-on technical material to assist countries in their operationalization. So how to produce this data, knowing that the ecosystem, the data ecosystem at the national level is quite complex when we talk about the production of migration statistics, and you probably already know many data producers, etc. So we are working towards a set of guidelines for proposing different data collection strategies. There is another product on data integration. This is finished. It has not been shared with the Statistical Commission yet, but this is very high quality. Everything is available in the web, the link that I showed in the previous slide. It was prepared by a subgroup of under the leadership of the United States, and gives very critical examples, very good examples of how to integrate data sources, both at the micro as well as the macro level. And then the next steps for us will be, of course, to make sure that countries are aware of this material, can adopt and adapt this material. So we are also starting looking into the development of a capacity development program to make sure we can assist our countries. I think I'm going to stop here, Marina, and I know I've been long, but if you give me the floor, it's difficult for me to stop. Sorry.
No, absolutely not. You were not long, Francesca. I'm very grateful because I think, indeed, it's so challenging, as you mentioned, to have a very brief, a very succinct overview of all the efforts which went into formulating a number of global recommendations and tools. And indeed, as you correctly said, through a very consultative process. So I think I'm very excited about the results of the expert group. Indeed, it is really a true partnership representing different stakeholders, definitely governments. And looking forward, there's a huge amount of work to be done, because one thing is come up with a formulation, with a recommendation, but another thing, how to ensure that on the ground things are really changing, so that indeed the knowledge that we are missing is emerging to those who need to take action today. And this is, I think, as what we're seeing, there's a huge demand for us working in that area to ensure that we act now. Maybe it's not the perfect solution, but now policymakers have information. Now they can take a decision, not in a blindness, but really geared by certain indications. As they say, it's better to have poor data than no data at all. So because you need to kind of be able to pick up those signals. So as a next step, let's maybe listen from Diego, because Diego works in South Africa, a country which we would say really has very advanced approaches to mainstreaming migration into statistical systems. We are always excited to learn from examples of South Africa, and also to tap into the knowledge of Diego as a stakeholder who has been monitoring the developments and really who has personally contributed a lot to enhancing knowledge about human mobility, to enhancing disaggregation work, so that we understand, have information on specific groups. And specifically inclusive data incorporates a bit knowledge on indeed and work going beyond the single number. So Diego, over to you for sharing your ideas, experience of working in South Africa, but also globally.
Thank you very much, Marina. Good morning from South Africa. Good afternoon to all of you in Wanzu. Indeed, partnerships are critical in the pursuit of sustainable development goals, and in particular in the production of data that can measure indicators related to this, particularly when we are speaking about migration and gender. The SDGs speak about inclusivity of migrants in programs, as well as in monitoring through various frameworks. But we can quite safely say that poor governance of migration that is attributed to poor availability of data will result in a poor uptake of sustainable development. We also know that new demands for disaggregated quality migration data result in new challenges for migration measurement. So when we speak of migration management needing to be done in a whole of government and whole of society approach, these are the partnerships that we need to pursue. Now, to achieve the need of providing quality, timely, relevant, comparable, and disaggregated migration data with a focus on gender, partnerships are required to establish globally agreed on standards and indicators that enable policies and programs to be undertaken. Not all migration indicators can be that are required for reporting or policy formulation can be produced by a NSO. Besides local demands and local considerations, migration, as we know, is a key part of the Agenda 2030 program. And we also know that there will be indicators identified from paragraph 70 of the IMRF resolution of 2022. In addition to that, there are many themes such as labor and child migration, as well as those related to forced migration, such as internally displaced persons, refugees, and asylum seekers that need to be informed by such data. So firstly, we would say that many indicators are collated by the mandate of other departments in a government system. So we need to partner with these other government departments. In this regard, data sharing agreements between such departments and a national statistics office are essential, as is the need to inculcate a culture of using such data for decision-making purposes. As a result of migration being of an international nature, we need to foster partnerships at a regional level. So in this regard, peer-based capacity development is a key initiative in terms of producing migration statistics that will explain regional dynamics. At a global level, we've just heard from Francesca, partnerships designed to coordinate the development of statistical frameworks, such as the Expert Group on International Migration Statistics, whose main objective was to revise the recommendations on international migration statistics, have taken place and have fostered partnerships across many stakeholders around the world. And we can say the same about the EGRIS group, which has published recommendations on statistics of the refugees, internally displaced, and the stateless. From issues such as the measurement of the diaspora and their related characteristics to matters related to forced migration or irregular migration in cross-border communities, we require partnerships that involve different levels of government in order to realize the objectives of the two global compact and to come up with sustainable and durable solutions. We have heard of the opportunities that the IFMS have provided the global migration community. And in the same light, the Global Gender Forum will be hosted in South Africa later this year, hopefully with similar outcomes. Now, in terms of country practices, South Africa is a member of the IDAC group, and I'm pleased to chair one of the working groups that is dealing with the identification of indicators for children on the move. IDAC is an entity that is coordinated by UNICEF, IOM, and OECD, and aims to highlight data collection and advocacy around child migration in all its forms. A session on the IDAC actually took place at the World Data Forum yesterday to discuss the importance of this. At a local level, South Africa has also established a National Migration Urbanization Forum in partnership with the Department of Social Development's National Population Unit. This unit is responsible for the population policy, and in partnership with the NSO that I represent, it pushes the migration agenda from an evidence-based perspective consistent with national legislation. The forum allows for discussion on issues related to migration and urbanization, research and data, and is very distinct from a migration coordinating committee, which is a more policy-based structure. The forum enables the country to pursue policy-relevant research and ensures that deliberations in these spaces are evidence-based. In this coming year, the forum and its partners will develop a migration profile report, which will serve as a common source of reference for the South African government. The forum mainly attracts stakeholders from other government departments, as well as academia, civil society, research organizations, as well as international organizations that are in South Africa. With regards to gender, Statistics South Africa is improving its gender data in order to monitor all SDGs that are related to it. This is being done by collecting gender-specific indicators that are characterized by being of good quality and are comparable. The intersection between migration and gender is very underexplored in South Africa, but at the root of it, a lot of the vulnerability that we see that a lot of particularly mixed migrants have lies at that intersection. There are major partnerships in existence at a regional and national level, and I'll just highlight three of them. Firstly, the UN Women East and Southern African Regional Office have assisted in compiling a national gender statistics assessment. The African Union's Women, Gender Development and Youth Directorate, along with the African Development Bank and the Economic Commission for Africa, have developed an African Gender Index. And much closer to home, the Statistics Office engages with the Department of Women, Youth and People with Disability on issues of common concern. In all of these cases, the potential for including migration in future programs and in future publications exists in order for the relationship between migration and gender to be further explored. Finally, then, I just want to highlight that in terms of its survey program, Statistics South Africa has implemented migration modules in 3 iterations of the quarterly labor force survey, and currently an income and expenditure survey with an extensive migration module is in the field. Opportunities still exist with the general household survey, which is a household and service delivery survey to include questions on migration. And this survey also includes questions on disability, so we can explore this particular relationship, as well as in the demographic and health survey that enables us to explore the relationship between gender, migration, and health. Finally, South Africa stands ready to support such partnerships and to continue to produce the necessary statistics around migration and gender in order to realize the objectives of sustainable development and to ensure that no one is left behind. With that, thank you very much, and back to you, Marina.
Thank you so much, Diego. As I mentioned, there's so much knowledge that you are sharing, and I learned already a couple of very interesting initiatives that are forthcoming in South Africa, but also collaboration. What concerns gender, for instance, and as we start adding additional parameter to our work, so we speak today about, we represent those who work on migration. That's Francesca, myself, IOM, OECD, we're going to hear from Jean-Christophe. But when we add additional element, like characteristics gender, you spoke about the need to engage and collaborate with another set of partners. So you spoke about UN Women with whom we're also collaborating, and it's great to know that they are spearheading and supporting you in strengthening availability of data on gender as a whole, but also when we add migration, in addition to that, then the data work becomes even more complicated. We would need to disaggregate not by one parameter, but several parameters and cluster those characteristics together. But I was happy to hear about a gender index, which is introduced on the continent in Africa. So we're going to look forward to learn more about the broader gender work on the continent, how to strengthen that data, what concerns those who are actually taking decision to move population and move migrants. So very interesting. Thank you so much. And again, your statement about the importance of working with maybe stakeholders in the country beyond statistical office. So again, we've been speaking about the importance of disaggregating data and tapping into potential of administrative data sources for many years already. So, but again, one thing is to say that these data sources have some sort of potential. Another thing is, how do you do that in practice? So, because the administrative data sources are usually in the hands of migration policymakers, migration stakeholders. So, thank you, Diego, and I would like to now maybe turn to Jean-Christophe, who is also an amazing expert with a lot of experience. And the OECD has really spearheaded a lot of very important initiatives and products which we are all aspiring to learn from. So Jean-Christophe, floor is for you now to update on your work and maybe specifically draw a little bit of attention to what it means to deliver and develop data so that it feeds policymakers, but also policymakers which are forward-looking. So not only speaking about past, but looking to the future. So over to you, please.
Well, thank you, Marina. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to participate in the World Data Forum and in this panel in particular. I mean, the question of partnership is certainly key. I think we will all agree on that, particularly on the migration data area. This is necessary for a number of reasons that I will try to highlight briefly. It brings clear value added, but as you just said, Marina, I think it's most efficient when it's policy oriented and forward looking. So I'll try to share with you a few examples based on the OECD experience on that. Starting with the first point on partnerships between data producers and users. So I'll try to highlight different type of partnership in my 10-minute presentation. So partnership between data producers and users. One, I think, very good example from the OECD perspective is what we call the SOPEMI network, or the expert group on migration, which was established in 1973. So we are celebrating the 50th anniversary today. This is a group that brings together experts from all OECD countries, but not only. It also includes some EU non-OECD countries such as Romania and Bulgaria. It includes China, experts from the Russian Federation. It's really a broad network that enable us every year to share the recent trends and policy changes in all OECD countries and beyond, as I just said. And therefore build a collective knowledge about migration based on common reporting standards. This model has been extended to some other part of the world through partnership with ILO and the Asian Development Bank Institute in Tokyo, for example. We are covering since 13 years now about 20 Asian countries through a partnership around a roundtable on labor migration in Asia. We are also cooperating with International Development Bank in the Americas, IDB for Latin American countries, following a 10-year partnership with the Organization of American States along the same model. And this is bringing a lot of insight into the developments of migration and integration in about 80 countries in the world based on this partnership. I think partnership between countries can also help in a number of cases to, let's say, highlight some trends which then are extremely useful for policymakers. So if I can just quote briefly two facts from forthcoming publication settling indicators of integration of immigrants, which we are jointly doing with the European Commission. just two basic facts. This is a publication that covers more than 80 indicators of integration, again, based of sharing data across the countries and beyond. For example, if you look at one specific country, let's say Sweden, if you look at Sweden, employment rate of migrant women in Sweden, you find it's 60%. This is 18 percentage points below the native-born, so the Swedish-born woman. And this is one of the highest gap in terms of employment between migrant women and native-born women. So you can say, Sweden has a problem with the integration of migrant women. But then if you compare to some other countries, and notably to the OECD total, what you see is that on average, in the OECD, employment rate of native-born women is close to 60%. So migrant women in Sweden have, yes, lagging behind native-born women in Sweden. But when you, let's say, zoom out and compare to other countries, then you realize that part of a problem in Sweden, which is an issue to be addressed, is also based on the fact that Sweden has very high standard in terms of integration of women in the labor market altogether. Another example from this publication, we know, for example, that about 2/3 of OECD countries, lower skilled immigrants have actually higher employment rate than native-born with the same level of qualification. When it comes to highly skilled migrants in all OECD countries, in all of them, foreign-born tertiary educated migrants have lower employment rate than native-born tertiary educated migrants. So here you have a similarity across countries that is telling you something, that countries, yes, have more and more selective policy. Yes, migrants are more and more educated, but they also have very specific issues regarding their integration into the labor market. These issues are linked to recognition of foreign qualification and skills, access to regulated profession, public employment, and sometimes discrimination. Understanding that this is a common issue brings countries together in terms of trying to address this issue and learning from each other. So in that sense, international comparison through partnership and data sharing enables peer learning and benchmarking of outcomes in migration and integration sphere. Second type of partnership I want to highlight is between countries. And here again, we have an example based on a project which was initiated by the OECD, which is called a database on immigrants in OECD and non-OECD countries, DIOC. This is for the current edition jointly established with the World Bank. It's a very simple idea which consists in working with NSO across the globe, and thank you very much for all of you who are sharing your data with us, to collect a few tables based on place of birth, but by education and much more detailed characteristics. So that by adding this data together, I can then tell you how many people were born in China or Senegal or Guatemala, and where they are and what they are currently doing, let's say, as a job. How many are in employment, how long they've been there, and obviously have a socioeconomic profile of these people. This database enables us to give a global profile of immigrants to the OECD and worldwide when we are able to collect globally this data. In a way, this is a project where what you get is what you share. If I provide the data to the others will provide the data on my immigrants. And that helps, obviously, to develop, for example, more efficient diaspora policy, or to understand the dynamic of the emigration from my country to the rest of the world. This is, I think, a very interesting project. You can look online at the OECD website on DIOC, database on immigrants, and in OECD and non-OECD countries. The third type of partnership I would like to highlight briefly, because my colleagues already mentioned many of that, is between institutions. And this is also absolutely key. I mean, Francesca and Diego mentioned the International Forum on Migration Statistics, and the 3 edition we already have. The OECD is very happy to take the lead on the 4th edition that will be organized in 2025 in Europe. This is a unique opportunity to bring together policymakers, NSOs, students, researchers to discuss about the recent development in terms of data collection and its implication on policies. In the last IFMS that was organized by UNDESA in the premises of ECLAC, we had, if I don't mistaken, almost 700 people online and in person all together for that meeting. This is really a great partnership that we have, not only with the 3 co-organizers, UNDESA, IOM, and OECD, but with a number of institutions, Eurostat, UNHCR, and many other partners. Diego mentioned already IDAC, which is an alliance for data on children on the move, which has 47 members currently, 22 member states, 11 international organizations, 12 NGOs working in 4 working groups. Again, I think coming from the initial fact that we all know there is a large number of children on the move, but we know very little about them. So how can we address this knowledge gap? I think this is the only way is through partnership. There are many other examples of inter-institutional partnership that are bringing clear value added. Recently, I can just mention the one that OECD has put together with EUAA, which led us to the publication of a joint report between EUAA, OECD, and IOM on Ukrainian, on displaced Ukrainian, both outside Ukraine and within Ukraine. I mean, these partnerships are multiple and I think essential to the work that we do collectively on migration. But let me just end with this very important point that this is very useful to obviously do things based on past data, but I think there is even more to be done on data from looking forward. So basically, I think we need to enhance the partnership for the future of migration data, as well as data for the migration future. So the future of migration data, this is, as it was said already, a combination of better using existing sources, notably administrative sources, and using new data sources, and notably big data. This is a big challenge because these data are disseminated through a number of stakeholders. There is some data with social networks, some data like Google Trends Analytics, which are linked to browsers. There are some groups which are collecting data through media news, phone usage, etc. These data are, let's say, spread across multiple partners, and therefore it's necessary really to come together to make understand the potential and make the best use of this new source of information. I just want to point to 2 different projects here, not from the OECD, one from the United Economic Commission for Europe, UNSD, which has produced in December 2022 an excellent report, which is called Use of New Data Sources for Measuring International Migration. I really encourage all of you to take a look at that. And also an initiative that was launched by IOM, the Big Data Migration Alliance, BD4M, And I think this is through this sort of initiative that we can really start to understand the potential of these new data sources for monitoring migration and policy making. My very last point is on this other side of a coin, which is not the future of migration data, but data on migration future. And here, the OECD is very deeply engaged in trying to, let's say, close the knowledge gap, improve information for policymakers so that they can improve preparedness and anticipation. We're talking basically about 3 lines of work. One is nowcasting, largely based on big data, as I mentioned. The second, which I think is really an important gap in the migration area, is on forecasting. Forecasting means anticipating flows for, let's say, medium-term time horizon. We're talking maybe 12 to 18 months. There is very little actually in this area, both on legal and on forced migration. And so the OECD is committed to make a breakthrough there, again, through partnership with other institutions. And the last one is on foresight, which is always extremely useful, provided that it can bring together migration analysts and policymakers, which is often a challenge for a number of reasons, including time constraints and different, short-term perspective from policymakers compared to maybe the longer-term perspective of a migration analyst, etc. But I think in these 3 areas, nowcasting, forecasting, and foresight, there is a need for reinforcing our cooperation so that we can help policymakers to make informed decisions and probably be more proactive rather than reactive to what happens in the world in relation to forced migration and regular migration. With that, let me end, and I'll be happy to take any question. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jean-Christophe. Indeed, as you were saying, I mean, what really was quite important from what you just shared is really, as we mentioned at the very beginning. So just knowing the number is not enough. It's how does this number compare with if we take employment of migrant women in a country, how does it compare to natives? But also, what is normal? Is it bad or is it good? What is the policy message that we are trying to deliver by showcasing a specific number? And that's why relative way of placing a specific number in a context with other parameters, with other characteristics or similar indicators of other population groups is very critical. You spoke about the importance of zooming on the situation of children in the move, and indeed our collaboration with UNICEF and other partners within the International Alliance on data on children in the move is absolutely critical. Yes, there is a partnership, but what are the tangible results that we are getting for the action on the ground? The focus on the forward-looking approach is so critical. Everybody is asking about us to be better prepared for the future. The UN Secretary General is organizing Summit of the Future. Yes, it's about the new UN, about the new fate of multilateralism, but at the same time about how we can be better prepared for acting, not based on what we know about the past, but really understanding what is coming towards our end. There's huge agenda there, lots of efforts happening, indeed, lots of products emerging, and again, zooming into partnership and collaboration together is absolutely critical. Thank you so much. We have just a few minutes left, literally 7 minutes left. And I'm not a very good moderator because I promised the participants that I will give that space. We did ask you to formulate your questions. I hope that we can at least take 1 or 2 questions from the audience. So this is your opportunity to share your impressions, make a statement, if something resonated in what we shared with you today. Francesca, if you can help me to see what's happening in the actual room, other colleagues or participants who would like to make a statement, because we don't see that. Can you please tell us, is there any interest from the real audience, meaning people who are with you, to engage?
Just checking, Marina, if there is
Yes.
anyone who has a question for the speakers. Of course, I'll be here also for the coffee break, so maybe you want to ask, take advantage of our colleagues online. You have Statistics South Africa, you have OECD, and you have Marina from IOM.
If
Yes,
not,
just
well,
one question.
oh,
One
there is
question.
one.
Hold
Okay,
on.
great. Let's take that. Okay.
Hello, my name is Eduard Michalash. I'm from UNHPA. You mentioned that the Statistical Commission revised the definition of international migration, or the recommendations that were initially approved in 1998, I guess. Can you provide more details? What is now the definition and how, I mean, it is still 12 months counting the international migration and temporary migration? If you can provide more details on that. Thank you.
Of course, it's the $100 million question. It's going to take a little bit longer than the few minutes that we have left, but I'll be happy to follow you to the coffee break. So in terms of the short answer is that it's very similar. We are still looking at a duration criteria. So we are giving two options to countries. Either they go with the 12 months duration of stay, or it's 6 months plus 1 day. So, but apart from that, that's the international standard. What we are really asking countries is that in order to produce data that are relevant and usable at the country level, please do use the same duration criteria that you are using to define the resident population. So there are certain countries that are actually deviating from the 12 months or from the 6 months plus 1 day. They are using some other duration criteria. So what we want to promote is that at the national level, there is comparability between migration statistics, in particular in this case, migration flows, and change in the resident population. So whatever is their definition for statistical purposes of resident population, we want countries to apply the same definition when they move into the field of producing migration statistics. And then it will be up to us at the global level to find a way to translate those national definitions into something that is comparable, or at least at a certain level of harmonization, we'll find a way to put the data together and come up with regional estimates and global estimates. Thank you.
That's a question. You said you needed a few hours to explain the new definition, Francesca. So, but it did come up because that's probably one of the major changes which is coming our way. Indeed, for all of us, it's important. And maybe just to confirm that, maybe if you can clarify also that the actual introduction and force of the definition will happen in 2025 with the final adoption of recommendations by the Statistical Commission. Is this correct in terms of the timelines?
Yeah, so what we did this time in the revision of the recommendations is a little different from the past. We decided to unpack the different steps and to bring bit by bit, piece by piece, the different blocks to the Commission for adoption. So we started with the conceptual framework. We discussed, we agreed, we brought it to the Commission, and the Commission adopted the first product. Now, recently, we brought an initial component of the operationalization with this set of indicators, and it was adopted. And then the next step is to bring these two pieces together to add some elements of operationalization, because we also want to give some guiding principles on how to make all these conceptual, theoretical solutions viable and usable at the country level. So these 2-3 pieces are still missing. We are actually finalizing now as you speak, and all the book together will be brought again to the Commission in 2025. So you are right, Marina, but we are not going to ask for adoption again on the conceptual framework, nor on the indicators. Those pieces have already been adopted, so there will be, we believe that that's the best way to digest the different blocks as we go, rather than asking the Commission to adopt this huge and over this set of recommendations in one go. So they are really following us. As I say, the expert group behind this work is composed mainly by member states. So they are very much involved in the discussions and in what we are bringing for adoption to the global statistical community. So there is overall support, but the challenge is in the operationalization. So conceptually we agreed. Now let's see how we can make it real at the country level. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. And that's actually, unfortunately, we ran out of time to solicit further questions or intervention from the audience. We need to wrap up. But very briefly, let me then use the few seconds that we have left to remind everyone of a few developments coming our way. Indeed, 2025 is going to be a very important year, where we are looking forward to finalize the package of related to the adjustment of the recommendations on international migration statistics. 2025 is also the year when we are convening together under the leadership of OECD and in partnership with DESE and ourselves, IOM, for the fourth iteration of International Forum on Migration Statistics. As mentioned in the chat, we are welcoming everyone to join the Global Migration Data Network LinkedIn group, which we are piloting to ensure that there is information flowing. So everybody, please join us and stay connected moving forward. I'm really thanking all the participants of today who joined us, both as on the platform, but we know also there is a big audience monitoring us through web TV. So there will be this recording available if you have any questions. So you have our information on the platform. Feel free to approach, and we look forward to collaborating with everybody moving forward. And many thanks to Francesca, Diego, Jean-Christophe, and the team who was behind organizing from IAM and all other organizations, the organizers of the forum. So I wish everyone success in continuing the discussion, other sessions, and stay tuned and stay connected. Many thanks to everybody again, and bye-bye.